All right, I think we're ready to get things started. If you want to call the meeting to order, Chair
Yeah.
Cup.
Let's do it. Go. I'm calling the meeting to order. Item 2, roll call. You do a roll call, please, John.
Absolutely, thank you. Committee member Bryant.
Here.
Committee member Merhar.
Here.
Committee member Sakles.
Here.
Committee member Thompson.
Wait for it.
I'll come back to committee member Whitebread.
Here.
Vice Chair Shu. The vice chair has informed me she was not going to be able to make this evening, so this will be an excused absence. Chair Cup,
Yes, I am here. And
and we'll try one more time. Committee member Thompson. Are you there, Tutu?
Oh, hi. Yes,
Okay.
It took me a while to unmute this thing. Yeah, fat
Okay.
finger.
Thank you.
okay, so roll call is done. We'll go on to item 3, minutes approval. The minutes for the November 9th, 2022 meeting have been delivered to committee members and copies posted on the City Hall bulletin board. If there are no corrections or additions, a motion is in order to approve these minutes.
I motion to approve the minutes.
I second.
Okay, so motion by Regina Cycles, second by Susan Merhar. Or did I get that mixed up?
Got the
Maybe
reverse, but
I reversed
I
it.
followed it.
Okay. And let's do a roll call here.
Absolutely. Cliff Bryant,
Yes.
Susie Merhar,
Yes.
Regina Sakles,
Yes.
Tutu Thompson,
Yes.
Don Whitebread,
Yes.
Vice Chair Shu, and then Chair Cup.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so that passes. We have minutes. Let's go on to item 4. I believe we have oral communications from the public. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the committee on any matter not on the agenda. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. State law prohibits the committee from acting on non-agenda items. So you can raise your hand now, or if you're on the phone, press a button.
It's *6. So if you'd like to make
Okay.
a public comment at this point in time, we do have a member of the public on the line. If you'd like to speak, please raise your hand or hit *6 so we know you would like to speak. I'm not seeing any hands raised. Okay. We have no.
Okay, no public. Well, they're here, but not talking. So I'm going to item 5, upcoming agenda topics. This portion of the agenda is reserved for identification of agenda items for future meetings. We have some bullet points here. Placemaking opportunities related to Castro Interim Pedestrian Mall and other long-term capital improvement CIP projects. Bulk art strategy. Discuss how art placement and landscaping integration can be further explored. Biodiversity strategy. K5 augmentations to better capture more CIP projects. Joint committee meeting with the downtown committee and Evelyn Park project 2160.
And I would like to give a little bit of context just on the placemaking landscaping. This topic is not really for discussion, but just to provide a little more clarity. So your staff did have a conversation with the Community Services Department, who is leading the biodiversity strategy. The biodiversity strategy is really looking at all kinds of things having to do with trees, landscaping, all those elements. And so where this becomes very important to the VAC, or could become very important to the VAC, is how art could actually be incorporated into landscaping. And just so it's a little more clear, and we'll be able to bring this topic back as the biodiversity strategy gets going. It's still very much in its kind of background, doing research. We did provide the K5 policy to the consultant team that's doing the work. But when I first joined the city a little over a year ago, one of the parks K5 projects, you looked at a butterfly habitat that was going to be artistic, that would include a butterfly habitat. So those are the kinds of things where the biodiversity strategy would look at. So this was something that was brought up by a member of the public to consider. So I'm just trying to put a little finer point on what that topic is and what we plan to bring back in the future to the committee. So just so it's a little more clear what that is really referencing and what that means.
Awesome.
At this point in time, I'd be happy to take any additional suggestions for future topics or ideas that people are interested in having placed on the agenda.
I actually looked at my notes from last meeting, and I think our discussion last time made it clear to me that maybe it would be good if we would have a discussion about touch points with the artists. It seemed to me we had a little bit of a different strategy each time. You know, what do we expect from artists? What is in the call for artists? When do we have the next touch point with the artist? How do we manage that? Do we go back to them or not? If we have a catalog of requirements, I just feel like we maybe have to have a clearer understanding what ideally we expect. Also, I struggled a little bit with the CAFE platform. I always struggle with the CAFE platform, but a bit more this time, because I felt like many of the artists did actually not respond to the two questions, how they were intended to respond. So it was hard to find the information sometimes. And I'm wondering if we can have a discussion, if there's any other way we can do this or improve the process in some way. So two-part thing probably, but somewhat interconnected.
And I noted that. I would like to just draw your attention to item 7.3. Part of the discussion from last committee meeting had to do with that threshold. So your staff has put together a memo on that. So this is one element of the things you talked about, which we'll be addressing a little later this evening, or at least having a conversation on. And I noted the two other aspects for future items. So thank you.
Thanks.
Other topics?
Well, I just want to kind of follow what Susie was saying about the process of judging the artworks. So I could not find, and I don't know if anybody managed to find the original call. So I was interested in the verbiage in the text that the artists were looking at when they were submitting the artwork, because I also found there were a lot of, as far as I remember, we asked for local artists. And there were a lot of artists that were even out of the country, not even in the country. So, and I just wanted to kind of compare what they were submitting with what the actual call was. And I could not find it. And it could be maybe good if you had a package next time, like we have the original call and then the artist statements and then the CAFE platform I love as much as Susie. So that'd be maybe a good thing.
I also heard some input recently from an artist that I was telling about, and I said, you should apply. And she said, is it on the CAFE? And I said, yes. And she was like, oh no. Apparently a lot of artists don't like using the CAFE platform. They say it's difficult on their end. They say it asks a lot of repeat questions and it's hard to upload information. So I don't know if there's an
Or
alternative.
it could be an idea to use another platform.
As far as I know, it's the only game in town, though.
Is
I
it?
don't know if there's anything comparable to it.
Okay.
I saw another call for artists that used SlideRoom, which is usually used by colleges when students need to submit a portfolio. That's how I know SlideRoom. but
Mhm.
apparently that might be able to be used for call for artists as well. I
Yeah,
think Palo
I
Alto
think
did call for artists with Lightroom, actually.
A lot of it has to do with, yeah, it may be a nice platform, but cafe is kind of the standard at this point. So we're going to get more. we're
It
gonna
is the
broadcast
biggest
to
user
more
base.
people.
More
Yeah,
true.
traffic. Yeah, I
Yeah.
understand.
I
that.
wonder if maybe we could try accepting through 2 platforms or something, and then accept both submissions and see like, oh, maybe cafe really is just like
yeah.
the
No,
dominant
it'd
force.
be- I don't know how much it costs or whatever, but it seems
Yeah.
like we should try something else.
I think Google did something that wasn't cafe when they were getting artists for their big project in North Bayshore with like an outdoor kind of plaza and places to hang out, and at least 3 different big pieces of art. There might have been more, but I think they did it through Google Forms or Sheets or something. I'm not sure exactly, but
So if I may interject, and what I heard is, let's bring back a conversation and discussion on the platform.
yes,
As a future agenda item, so thank you.
sounds good.
Regarding landscaping and art placement, I want to draw attention or the committee's attention to a marvelous piece that I discovered in Palo Alto on Charleston between Middlefield and Central, where they had planted a medium, so with vegetation, etc., a divide along Charleston, and at the entrance of it or at the beginning of it, they have a lovely 3-piece sculpture, just lovely, very colorful, integrates in with the planting very well. You can, and I think it's a very nice example of what can be done if one has the, should we say, the will and the money to do it. But if you want to see an example of very I hate to use the word creative, but very lovely integration of art and landscaping on a public street, on a divide, on a road, head over to the area on Charleston between, I think, Middlefield and Central.
Charleston, Middlefield, and Central. It's a 3 streets meet.
No, it's you go on Charleston, driving along Charleston. If you go from Middlefield, I think recall it was on the area between Middlefield and Central Expressway.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds
Yeah.
really cool. I would check it out.
Yeah, it's worth a drive by just to help.
So is it just in
have
the
an
middle?
example of what is possible to be done?
It's in the middle of the road? Is it like a divider between lanes? Or is
Yeah,
it
it's a medium.
okay.
It's like if we took a medium and put it on California Street
Yeah.
and broke up a wide area. They were trying to obviously slow down traffic. I think it's near the school
Yeah.
there. So they're trying to traffic calming measure by
Mhm.
planting in the middle of Charleston to slow down traffic.
Yeah.
But as part of the planting, they've added a 6-foot, 9-foot sculpture.
Oh, nice.
And lovely piece, a
Yeah.
nice surprise, a nice
Yeah.
integration in with the planting.
And you could also do that to a protected bike lane.
Yeah.
That's what I've heard that suggested.
Yeah.
So thanks for that.
Yep.
I wanted to ask for clarification about the biodiversity project. Is that essentially about like maintaining our native kind of plants or reintroducing them if they've been driven out or something?
It is, and I just want to caution, we're
Yeah.
taking topics.
Yeah.
This is not
Not a big
discussion, but yes,
freewheeling.
the biodiversity is about returning native plant species. There's also habitat restoration, things of that nature as part of that process.
Okay, great. Growing out.
Okay, future new topic. I actually talked to my son's middle school art teacher. There's interest for a call for young artists. Like, can we pilot some program to encourage young artists?
To do what?
Well, like right now we have call for artists to display their artwork in, say, the performance hall. So can we also create create a program to call for young artists to display their work?
I don't know. My thinking of that is always like, why don't the teachers do that or the schools? I mean, we just
But
passed
wasn't
our
that-
new
Yeah.
1%
we
funding
need a-
for school and arts. So
We'd need a venue before we could do anything.
But there used to be at City Hall, used to be always a,
that's
you know,
CSMA.
school.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
not a
that's
public
CSMA.
school,
Oh, okay.
but public schools do contract CSMA to help them with their art programs. So sometimes they send teachers to different public schools to help, but it is a nonprofit and they have a rotating display.
Right.
Sometimes, I don't know if they still have that, but they've definitely had it in the past at City Hall, and they also have a rotating display at the library where they bring in children's artwork and show it there.
So CSMA has a dip to these two locations. What can public school art teacher do to also get into similar programs?
I think it's a
she-
good idea, you know, we could,
Mm.
you know, even do that with the shop windows or something, you know.
I mean, it's non-existence right now, so it would be a
Right,
pilot
right,
program.
right.
Yeah.
Maybe you
We don't
should have that
anything.
as an item and talk
So
about it.
that's why I brought up as a future item on the agenda.
A long time ago, we used to have, kids displaying work in the lobby of City Hall.
That's Jesse was talking about.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
think it was that long ago.
Well,
honestly.
Before
It might have been
pandemic.
canceled during COVID or something. but-
pre-COVID,
Yeah.
a lifetime ago.
Yeah, like I guess 3 years now.
So I'm gonna kindly ask that we
Yes,
put that as a topic.
okay.
Be careful about conducting conversation on stuff we actually don't have agenda,
There's,
so
there's
Right.
not much else to do
That's a
tonight. I
topic.
think we should hash these all
Yeah.
out.
bring back.
Okay, we'll bring it back. Any
Yeah,
other?
we got
last
bigger fish to
things?
fry here.
You do have a very busy agenda, so we're
Yeah.
just focused on
Okay,
topics.
okay,
please.
yeah, topic submitted.
Okay, any other topics for future agenda items?
Okay.
I think not. So we'll go on to item 6, unfinished business.
We
Oh,
do
public
have a
commentary, right?
Public wishing to speak, so
Right.
I am going to allow Mr. Englund to talk.
Thank you, John. I will keep it short and I will keep it on topic. But I do have a question about scope for the landscaping and art. Yeah, it sounds like, so you talked to John Marchand or others on his team over in community services. The biodiversity strategy is great, totally support that. At the same time, I think that the art pieces and the landscaping could go beyond that as well. So it could support biodiversity strategy, but also just bread and butter stuff for community services is planning landscaping where it needs to go. So I personally wouldn't want it like hemmed in by having to support the biodiversity strategy. And maybe you're already thinking about that, but I just wanted to mention that after hearing what you had to say. I also want to mention to Cliff that the Central becomes Alma in Palo Alto. So for those who are thinking sort of Palo Alto, where Central in Palo Alto, it becomes Alma at the boundary of Mountain View and Palo Alto. I'm definitely going to check that out though. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you for the
Thanks, Bruce.
clarification as well.
Any other members of the public who want to speak?
I am not seeing any additional hands raised. Thank you.
All right, we'll go on to item 6, unfinished business. 6.1, capital improvement program CAP public art project updates. Staff will provide updates on Reinsdorf Park Aquatic Center CAP project 1838, Fayette Park CAP project 2048, and Reinsdorf Park Maintenance and Tennis Building CAP project 2148. Take it away, John.
Thank you. I'll make this very brief. Really, there's no substantial change since your last meeting. So if you look at the minutes that you just approved, there's really no significant change. The one thing I will call your attention to is we did get some updated insurance documents for the artist for Reinsdorf Park Maintenance. So we should be able to move forward with those agreements. And noted in the minutes, and just a refresher for the committee, we do intend to bring those the artist's thoughts after having had those conversations with the other committees, what they're thinking about as a design concept for this project, bringing that back to this committee, but we need to get these agreements executed first. now that we have some of the insurance requirements, that'll allow us to execute the agreements and then take the next step. So that's the only update as it relates. Everything else is status quo from the last update, which was noted in your minutes that are in the packet this evening. No other changes to note.
Which artist was the maintenance building artist?
It's two murals, and one is Fernanda, and the other
Haruma. Right?
Haroma. Yeah.
Okay, Haruma. Okay. But now that insurance is all cleared up and we're good to go. Okay, awesome. Okay, so then.
Are there any public comments on the update to the CIP projects? I'm not seeing any public comment. We can move on.
All right, let's see. I'm unmuted. That's good. We'll go on to 6.2, Center for the Performing Arts. Call for artists. This may be a big item today. We'll see how it goes. Discuss results of the jury for the call for artists for the Center for the Performing Arts 2023 gallery display. Select 6 artists and up to 3 alternates for art displays in the Center for the Performing Arts for 2023 to 2024. So I guess we're going to see our top vote getters.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is a very small presentation on a reflection of your jurying. Before I get into that, I did want to just provide some high-level comments. I appreciate the committee members that reached out to me. I'm sorry I didn't directly respond to. I was doing some work in the background related to your questions. So I do want to make some comments tonight for you and the public. So please note that the last time the Visual Arts Committee in the city actually issued a call for artists for the CPA display was in 2019. So it has been a couple of years since we last did this call for artists. And given the recent staff turnover, we modeled the call for artists after the 2019 call, but after reflecting on this call for artists, there were some small things that were missed along the way. So one thing I wanted to address for the committee was in the 2019 call, there was a desire, and going back through the minutes and notes of those meetings, there was a desire to expand the call for artists. So the call for artists was to reflect the 9-county Bay Area region. So it was a bigger call in seeking artist interest, but it was not to be out of state or out of country. So we were looking for artists to be within the Bay Area, i.e. the 9 counties that surround or make up the Bay Area. The call did specify it would be a limited period art display in the CPA. We did give the criteria for what the hanging systems would allow and the number of art pieces that could be accommodated. And the only other thing we noted in the call for artists was we did not have a specific theme. So it was an open call for whatever kinds of art that people wanted to submit, consistent with what our hanging systems would allow. And given the contour of the wall is the basic criteria that we provided. We had 63 responses. I want to thank the committee very much for taking the time to review all of those and either comment or score on them. And so getting into it, I am prepared to show you what the scoring came out. This is really the top 11 scores from all of you. And one of the things I thought was interesting, recognizing art can be very subjective. The average rating is what CAFE does. It just takes your average of your score. One of the things I did is did the median, so taking all of your individual scores and then taking a median. And then I wanted to figure out the range, kind of what was the highest score that a particular artist received. And this doesn't mean it doesn't necessarily reflect if they got, say, in this case, 2 7s, 3 7s. It just represents the highest score that was given was a 7. The minimal score was a 5. So it was really a range of 2. So if you're kind of looking at kind of the range of impressions from the VAC committee members, there was fairly unanimous kind of thought on the artist pieces. So the range is really the difference between the 7 and the 5. You'll notice towards the number 11, the range is 6. So the high score was a 7 and the lowest was a 1, which really reflects kind of a differing perspective maybe of the art that was being exhibited. The notes are kind of what the exhibit is, as well as a comment or comments that may have been made by the VAC. I wanted to provide you the location of where the artist is. Once again, getting to the context that this call was to represent the 9 Bay Area counties, and then whether any of these artists have actually exhibited with the city before. So there are 2 that I wanted to footnote. The very first one is actually one of the muralists that will be doing a mural as part of the Rangsdorf Park public art. And then towards the bottom of the table, this artist has submitted for exhibit, but was not one of the ended up not being one of the finalists that ended up displaying. They were considered as an alternate, but did not actually display. So that is a little bit of background and the scoring. I can go, so this is a high-level summary. Just to refresh your memory, these are in order. So the top vote getter was Martinez, and this was a sampling of the art pieces that were provided. Mallory. One of the questions was about the weight of these pieces. I did contact the artist. The artist was kind enough to provide me the weights of these pieces. They will work with our hanging systems at the CPA. So that should not be a challenge in terms of the hanging system. I do appreciate the comment and the flag by the committee to actually ask that in advance and anticipating the committee may ask the question. So the pieces, these tile pieces are within the weight framework of our hanging system in the CPA. Lima, Yoon, Bardak. These are quilt pieces. Broom. Allen. These are more paper pieces. Karimi. Bott. Bruckner. Quaritch. And that will take us to the end. So based upon the way we've divided up the year, we are looking for 6 artists to move forward as the primary artist to display, but we'd like to select 3 alternatives in case there are issues or conflicts. This did actually play a role in 2022. We did have an artist that needed to back out, and we were able to go back to our alternate list and select someone from our alternate list to be able to fill in. So with that, I will go back to the very first slide, which was a summary of the scoring. I wanted to keep this up for a minute, and I want to take it down so at least all of you can see each other and have a conversation. But this is the scoring. I'm not sure if you want to get into a particular individual or piece, or if you're comfortable with the way the scoring came out. If you really don't have any issues and you'd like to move forward with, say, the top 9 in scoring, you can certainly direct staff to do that. And I'm available to answer any questions you may have related to the scoring, or if you want to see imagery of this again. So I'm going to stop the share so you can have that conversation. If you want me to put it back up, just let me know.
Thank you. It was interesting to see the breakdown of the numbers like that, because it's never been just shown to us like that before, to see the difference between highest and lowest vote, the median, the average. So it's helpful. Am I correct in saying that if we do top 9, then we just have to do a tiebreaker vote between Bott and Bruckner?
I have a question for John. Just want to clarify how my scores have been has been translated into the final selection, because I only scored like maybe 11 or 12 artists. I left majority of them blank. So the blank in my dictionary, that meant 0. I'd like to clarify with John if those are interpreted as 0 on your end.
So they're considered blank, and they actually don't, because it's considered 0, it's considered null. It's not actually downgrading the score in any way. I left it as a blank field. So when the system is conducting the average, as well as the way I wrote the code to do the average, if you left it blank, it does not actually lower the score. It just is an average of the scores that were given. So whether 3 people scored it, 7 people scored it, it's the average of however many people scored it.
Yeah, you should mark it as 1 next time if you want to give it the lowest possible score.
Okay. I did not know that. Okay.
And
So
I
John,
do
can
think-
we revisit it, or it's let it go this time?
So I guess I would say this is certainly a conversation for the VAC to have. Recognize your next meeting is in February, and this first artist contract needs to happen in March. I would prefer not to be under that kind of gun to do the agreements. I think I would maybe suggest in the future score by not. So one way, as your staff, one way to interpret you not scoring it was you just didn't want to score it, or you were intentional and wanted to give it a 0, which is certainly your prerogative. But I would say in the future, if that's the thought, then I would say at a minimum, give it a 1. And that will pull down any average on any particular one you do not view appropriate.
Okay.
And then to your earlier question, Chair, you are correct. The last 2 are kind of neck and neck. I would say there is more consistency in terms of range with the artist Bott. The spread on Bruckner is 5, meaning there was a high score of a 7 and a low score of a 2, whereas Bott, the high score was a 6 and the low score was a 4, which may, in my interpretation, suggest that there was a little more consistency in the scoring, maybe for Bott, in viewing the art versus the bigger spread of a 7 and a 1. And so the average came out to 5.
Yeah, they're both 5, but you're saying 1 is less controversial if you look at our.
That would be one way to express the scores, if you will.
Can you put up that score spreadsheet again?
Yes.
Yeah, I would like to save time and by kind of just focusing on those last 2 if possible, since nobody above the score of 5 was disqualified due to anything like being, out of our region or being too heavy or anything like that. I think it's probably fair and would be expedient to just go from the top down and then decide now between Bott and Bruckner.
Well, and keep in mind, I mean, if you want to carry, let's see, if you want to carry 10, both Bott and Bruckner could be alternates, and you don't have to necessarily make that decision. It's kind of arbitrary if you want to carry 4 alternates.
I see. We could just have an extra alternate, and that doesn't. That's not.
If
really
you don't
better or
want to
worse.
get into the nuances of that, you could carry 4 alternates. And if you'd like to see their pieces again, I'm happy to advance forward to that if you'd like. But this is, I was referencing the range.
Yeah.
Once again, the range being between 2 and 5, if you needed to draw the line there, or alternatively, you can make a recommendation to say, we want to identify the top 6 as those to go forward, and we'll bring forward 4 alternates.
Right. I guess how do I don't have a particular preference, I guess, between 3 or 4 alternates. So I don't know. How do the rest of you feel, my fellow committee members? If you
mean,
want
what's
to, we
the-
can discuss it.
What's the chance that an alternate needs to step up in the past?
It's happened
What
before, I
was-
think.
It happened, but I
Fairly
mean, we have
regularly.
maybe 1 or 2. It doesn't really matter. I mean, we could keep them all there.
You definitely
And
need at
then
least 1
if-
alternate.
If it
there
goes
is-
bad, then for some artists and they can't show, then maybe everybody will get a chance.
Maybe
I
we
would
should
just
do
keep
more
it-
alternates, just keeping in mind, the triple demic and people getting sick. I think cancellations are just kind of happening more frequently in life right now.
So, the one thing I would say, just making sure I share it with the committee as well as any potential artists that listen is, we would schedule we schedule the artist for a particular time. Sometimes things come up, or maybe they get a conflict with a booking and they tell us they can't book. We can sometimes just flip with others in the future, and they still can present just at a different time. Or in the case that happened this year, there was a conflict that the person just had to withdraw, and therefore we had to
Yeah.
go to the alternate pool to fill that space. So
Yeah.
there can be different machinations of what happens when there's a conflict or someone is not necessarily able to display at the time that we identified for them. But we typically will do our best to work with folks and find the time and scheduling that works for them. The alternate is really just a backup in case something does happen where we need to backfill, and we've kind of run out of options.
John, could we see Bott and Bruckner again? And I just wanted to bring up, maybe we just need 2 alternates because they are packed, right? They're kind of close to each other.
There's Bott,
Yeah.
there's Bruckner.
Okay.
Bott. Bruckner.
Yeah, they're really different styles, but I think they're both nice. So
I'm actually really excited. I think we picked great ones, all of them actually.
Mhm.
And John, there was a range. Would we have the opportunity to approve? I remember that there was a range, this many artists max, or is it 4 to 6 or 6 to 8? Or, I mean, could we have more artists showing by?
So historically, it's a great question. Thank you. Historically, there has been the way it breaks out is to have the artist display for approximately 6 to 7 weeks, and they flip out fairly quick. And so because there's this overlap where we start in March and that goes through the year kind of to the next March, the sweet spot has been around 6. We could do 7. It just means everyone gets a smaller window to display. If you would like us to go down that path, I can work with the CPA on figuring out the dates in a smaller range. So you don't get 6 to 7 weeks, you get 5 weeks. And we could do more displays. But historically, it's been going back through most of the calls for artists, generally been 6 with 2 alternates. A couple of years they brought 3 alternates. And then in 2019, they for 2019, they identified 8 artists to display with 2 alternates. And then because of COVID and things that happened, it ended up being basically 6 artists displaying. So we
And then
can,
after a long wait, the other 2 got to come back. Great.
so we can, if there's a desire to actually have more people display than 6, I can work with the CPA team to figure out the timing of weeks, and we could go from there. So if you'd like to say, instead of doing 6, we really want 7, and say have 3 alternates, or you want 8 with 2 alternates, we could do that. I'm certainly open to the committee's recommendation or suggestion and how you would like me to negotiate with the CPA in doing these.
I think it's a good idea to, I mean, if you show in a gallery, usually it's 4 to 5 weeks that you get to show, you know, and then the gallery
but
gets the next
The
artist.
trick
so-
is that a gallery might be open 4 or 5 days a week, and the CPA is open 1, maybe 2 days a week. So if you're up in the CPA for 2 months, maybe there's 5 events. So, 2 months is the equivalent of a week in a gallery.
So I have a different question, John. Why, and this may be historical, why are we only displaying 1 artist at a time? What prevents us from having 3 artists at a time, 4 artists at a time for a period of 6, 7, 8 weeks? Why are we limiting it to 1 artist at each time? Is that because that's the way we've done it in the past?
I think it's just momentum, probably.
Well, there's just only so much wall space. You'd
I
have
think
to
it's a lot of wall
crowd
space. I mean, I
everybody
was
together.
actually,
Oh, come on, there's a lot of wall space there.
I was thinking the same thing as Cliff. I
2
was
or 3
thinking-
artists each
Yeah.
time. I mean, it's more on, I'm assuming that we're repeating what we've done in the past.
Yeah,
But
I think that's it.
is a reason why we couldn't have more artists, fewer pieces because of the restriction of the wall space, but have more artists each time that we do a display? Is that because of the staff overtime, the difficulty in arranging with the artists, or it's just that's the way we've done it in the past?
It's a great question. I don't know the answer. My intuition from what I've seen in the conversations I've had with the CPA is, 1, there's only so much weight the hanging system will allow. So I think there's a sensitivity to how many pieces on each, kind of how that gets spaced out. I think that's 1. 2, there is a coordinating event in terms of bringing the pieces in and bringing them out. So there's a lot of staff work that's associated with that. And then as the staff person that has to do the agreement, fewer agreements is personally better from a staff perspective than multiple agreements. And I don't know if that's why it was historically limited or not, but I can tell you as the person that's now doing the agreements, fewer agreements is better than multiple agreements. Just from a staff time perspective as well. But I will be very transparent. I do not know the history of why it is that way. I'm just kind of extrapolating based upon different conversations I've had and kind of researching.
Okay.
So if we had a new public art strategy with more funding into the city, we
Another
could have
staff
more
member.
staff available who could then have the time to work with more artists and curate an event like this. Is that a direction in the future, John?
I do think there's a piece of that. I think it's also a piece of making sure our department is staffed up again.
Yeah.
I think The other aspect to your question, which is a very good one, is, you know, thinking more holistically about other opportunities or locations to do this. The CPA is certainly one venue. Could this actually be explored in other city venues as a possibility? It would be another way of thinking about what you're suggesting, and can certainly explore that as we
Yeah.
think about other facilities that the city owns.
That's a very good point. Very good. Thanks, John.
Well,
Yeah.
and the CPA, you know, that space just cries out for big art.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
if you have, you know, 30-inch, 40-inch pieces of art on there, there's room for about 5 or 6 of them, maybe, unless you're counting going back that back hall. So so it's even as a single artist, if you have a 20-piece portfolio, you really have to thin it down pretty hard, even just with one artist in there.
Well, maybe we can discuss in the future about, you know, whether we want to go multiple locations or possibly do 2 artists at a time here and have them share the space. But either way, we should probably get back to this current discussion.
Is there a downside to having more alternates? Can we have first alternate, second alternate, you know?
I don't see a downside in having more alternates, really.
No.
I think people's schedules are crazy now. People, they get, well, especially with artists, it might not even be them being sick. It might be like, oh, I have another, you know, I have a mural project that's taking me a month over here, or whatever it is they're working on, or another show. All their work is out and not available to be displayed here. So I think it would be safer to have more alternates, because they've definitely been used. It's not at all rare for them to be used. I think if not every year, like at least every other year, we end up using alternates, roughly.
So what's the
Yeah, I
feeling
think so.
about having shorter exhibition time, like doing it for 6 weeks instead of 7? It was like 7 weeks, right? 7 or 8 weeks now?
It's between 6 and 7. So if the committee wanted to explore something more like 5.
Do we have the budget for that? Because we're allocated, you know, we chose this number considering the stipend and considering our yearly budget.
So based upon the budget, the set aside the VAC has, adding potentially 2 more artist displays or 3 more artist displays could be accommodated within the existing budget today.
Okay.
So Susie, I mean, Regina, you're proposing that we go down, shorten the period to 5 weeks, and thus have more artists being displayed.
Right. I
Correct?
think
Yeah.
that's,
Do we know how often there are shows at the CPA?
Yeah.
Well, I gotta say, I've walked in there a lot just to check out the art, and I think it's, even if it's not a show day, I think it is usually unlocked and available to the public. I could be right, or I could be wrong. Maybe John knows a better answer to this, but I
It
feel
is, but
Yeah.
you know, people don't do that much.
It was, when I showed, it was open at an odd hour, like at noontime.
Mhm.
Has that changed?
No, there typically are some A-frames out when when it is open, because you do want at least a docent in the area within that. So it's not necessarily open all the time because we want a docent in the area. I apologize, I don't know the frequency of shows. I don't have an answer to that question.
I think it's fairly booked. I don't know the number, but I remember talking to people on the Performing Arts Committee saying like sometimes they do 2 shows a day, you know, and they do it. And I think they do more shows than there are days in a year total. So it's a lot.
And
Go ahead.
I'm wondering if the city is doing some kind of outreach publicity about, which artist is showing. At the
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking,
because
Susie.
to me, it's all about promoting the artists, right, and giving them a
Mhm.
platform. In that sense, I would say, yeah, let's do 8 if we can. But especially if we, if they're being shown in a bulletin, like this is the next artist going to be this one, and,
Yeah, yeah.
would be a small portrait about them, then I feel like, yeah, we should have more, even
Yeah.
if the frequency the CPA is open is might not be
Yeah,
as
yeah.
much as we wish, because we might have other venues how we can promote the art.
That's a good idea, because then we don't have to rely exclusively on shows drawing people, like performing art shows, drawing people to see the art. If we advertise the art separately and have flyers or, do
Well,
online advertising that says, come see this art.
So
The
I'm
billboard,
just.
the billboard in front of CP on Castro Street, there's a billboard that flashes what's being shown. Part of that display is what artist is being shown at the CPA. So you see that lit up on Castro Street very brightly.
That's good, but there could be more
Yeah.
advertising, I feel like, online,
It's
on our
probably budget, it's
Facebook,
probably budget as well.
Instagram.
Yeah, it's probably what the budget is for that and
Yeah.
staff time to create.
Right, and then I'm looking at their website. So the visual arts exhibits are open Monday, Wednesday, Friday
Right,
from
yeah.
noon to 1 and 1
Right.
hour prior to every public performance.
Yeah.
That's what it says.
When I'm looking at the schedule, and yeah, it depends. In January, the first 2 weeks are almost empty. But then by later in the month, there's one show that runs every day. So there are, if you want to go see that thing, then you're going to see the art. And generally, if you have a kid in theater, you're going to see the art. So that's, a lot of the CPA focus is, with the PYT stuff.
Mhm.
This
Well,
is
I kinda
actually
like what
Jesse's
we-
department. You know how you're still at the library, right, Jesse?
Yeah, the library, they don't really have much to do with the Performing Arts Center, though.
But you know how
But-
library advertise their stuff, like the
Mhm.
summer concerts.
Yes.
Art, music, similar.
Yeah, they advertise
they're
it
the-
online on the library website and with flyers in the library.
Yeah, people
And
walk
if you
into the
sign up-
library, like way more people walk into the library than the CPA. And if there's a flyer being displayed on the library. Also,
Yeah,
how we promote those every summer, like every Thursday or whatever, there's a citywide on Castro, there's this whatever festival.
Yeah,
On the street there's a banner. However we did that, we can
That's
just copy and
true.
paste.
yeah, that's another possible advertising method. I don't think it would be appropriate for me to go to the library and say, please display this stuff, but if John or staff wanted to work with the library and come up with some agreement, there's definitely precedent for other city events being advertised at the library and promoted there.
Right. Okay, yeah. So not you,
website.
but
they probably would frown
that's a
upon that.
vehicle. Yeah, that is a vehicle, and the
Mhm.
banner in the city, like how we advertise the Monster Bash,
Yeah.
the same, just copy and paste that method.
So,
Well,
so
One
So
thing
would
in
you-
favor of shortening the time period on this is that really, if I remember when I had stuff up in the CPA and I went to a couple of the shows and kind of marveled at how little time anyone spent looking at the art, because they were there to see their kids. They were there, it's not an art gallery. They didn't go there to see art. They went there to see the show, and they were just on intermission. So what does help the artists, and the more artists we can cram in there, the better in this case, is that they get to say, hey, I've got art up at the Mountain View Performing Arts Center, and they get to take an Instagram picture of themselves
Mhm.
and put it on their resume.
And we've had artists organize receptions there before that I've attended.
Yeah,
Where they,
and there have been a couple of our
Right.
artists that worked it really hard, and they sat there with a table and they sold some art. But if you're not doing that, it's just nice to be able to do it. It's an accomplishment.
Yep.
So the more people we can give that to, the better.
yeah,
in some
I'm
ways.
with
So there's
I'm with
conflicting
Don
arguments.
and I'm with Don and Regina. Let's do as more as we can. So if to achieve that is to shorten the window, then let's do that to include more, to give the chance to more people to display.
That's probably something we should do next year. I think we're geared up for doing it this, we shouldn't change it much this year because we're kind of geared up, but whatever. John knows more about that than I do.
Well, we
So-
have picked the artists. I mean, we just have to change the dates. It doesn't, you know,
Yeah, nothing.
is anything printed and publicized yet?
Nothing's in stone. We basically said this is the typical art window, but we can, we still have to, and we still have to contact folks that you select. We can then say, here are the parameters of showing, and they can say, great, let's do a contract, or I'm not interested, and that's why you have alternates. So, what I'm hearing is instead of 6, I think maybe selecting 8, or well, maybe if you want my opinion from what I've heard, I would say, why don't you take the top 8? That is what you can direct staff to go figure out contracts with, figure out a schedule around that, and then bring 3 alternates to that. And should that not work out, swap in the alternates as need be, but I can certainly work with the CPA to figure out a scheduling approach based upon 8 that would take us through the balance of 2023 into the very beginning of 2024. It may be also an opportunity for staff to kind of evaluate how that goes. Did that work better, the same, or worse? To comments from the committee members that have said, you know, the value of being there and how the artist also may want to market the opportunity because it's really an opportunity for them to brand themselves with their display. So would really appreciate some recommendation or guidance from the committee on a step moving forward, as we're now approaching an hour into our meeting and we have a few other.
No,
I like 8.
That's a good plan. I'm comfortable with the plan, and I know this is a separate discussion, but I kind of like that plan more, provided that we are able to kind of not be so passive in our, you know, just kind of hoping people wander in and see the art while they're there for the show, because that's kind of been our default mode. So if we can do a little more promoting, a little more advertising, maybe work something out where if the artist does want to do a reception, then they Performing Arts Center make sure that there's staff there, even if it's a little later. Because I remember the reception I was at was like 7, 8 o'clock, and it went well, but I don't know if that's like a normal hour for them to be open or if it was just lucky because there was a show, but there's probably some things we could do to increase visibility.
I think it's a great suggestion, John. Let's pick the top 8 and have the other 3
So
ranked,
do we need
ranked alternates.
So do we need to make a motion then for that?
Yes.
So Regina, do you want to make a motion?
Sure.
Right.
I do a motion to have 8 artists show in the next perform CPA season of visual arts instead of 6.
Mhm.
And
With
would
3
you like to
alternates.
bring forward 3
Oh, and plus
alternates?
3 alternates.
Great.
Yeah, I second the motion.
All right, second by Cliff Bryant. Okay, let's do a roll call.
Committee member Bryant,
Yes.
committee member Mehar,
Yes,
committee member Sakles,
Yes.
committee member Thompson,
Yes.
Committee member Whitebread,
Yes.
Vice Chair Shu, and Chair Cup.
Yes. Right.
Thank you.
Unanimous.
We should take public comment on this item. My apologies, I should have flagged that earlier.
No problem.
Anybody wishing to make public comment on the CPA artist selection? Not seeing any hands. Okay, I believe our next item is the transit center grade separation. And we do have members of our Public Works team here to present, so I will allow them to share with you what's happening with the Transit Center grade separation and access project. I'd like to introduce Joy and Robert, and we also have Jim Lightbody on as well.
Hey, everybody.
Can everybody see my screen?
We can.
Yes.
Perfect. Good evening, everyone. My name is Joy Houghton. I'm an associate civil engineer in the Public Works Department Civil Infrastructure Group. And tonight I'm here to present one of the city's most exciting projects, the Transit Center Grade Separation and Access Project. Tonight's presentation includes project background, goals, schedule, project elements, urban design guidelines, design opportunities, and we'll conclude with next steps. I thought I'd start with this exhibit showing the existing condition of Castro Street, Moffett Boulevard, Central Expressway, and the Caltrain track intersection. Currently, about 104 trains cross Castro Street, and this equates to about a minute of gate downtime for each train. This number is anticipated to increase in 2024 when the electrification of the corridor is completed through the Caltrain modernization program. And the number of train is again anticipated to increase in 2040 to 398 trains per day with both Caltrain service and high-speed rail using the rail corridor. The Transit Center Grade Separation and Access Project started as part of the Transit Master Plan, which was completed in 2017. In 2018, City Council supported the concept of dividing the implementation of the Master Plan into two elements. The first element is the Transit Center Grade Separation and Access Project. The second element is the redevelopment of the Transit Center itself, which will include on-site vehicle circulation to meet current and future demands, and reconfiguration of the Centennial Plaza. This work will involve a possible partnership between the city and Caltrain for a mixed-use development and underground parking, which will begin when the city and Caltrain are ready to undertake the land use planning effort. In 2019, the mitigated negative declaration was completed and adopted by City Council. In 2020, the city entered into a co-op agreement with Caltrain and VTA for the final design phase of the project, Caltrain being the agency responsible for delivering the final design phase and VTA being the funding partner on the project. In 2021, the preliminary engineering phase was completed and the co-op agreement with Caltrain and VTA was executed. In January of this year, Caltrain issued a request for a proposal for design services, and final design phase started July of this year. The project proposes to improve safety for all modes of travel, improve traffic flow and reduce congestion, and also support pedestrianization of downtown Mountain View. The project is currently in final design phase, which is scheduled to be completed in July of 2024. Construction phase is anticipated to begin in July of 2024 and last through December of 2026. This image here shows the major elements of the project. The first one being the construction of a new vehicle ramp from West Evelyn Avenue connecting to Shoreline Boulevard to provide an alternate route for vehicles. The second one is a construction of a shared use path underneath Evelyn Avenue and Shoreline Boulevard, which will connect to the existing multi-use path on the west side of Shoreline Boulevard. The third is the closure of the at-grade vehicle crossing of the tracks and construction of the undercrossings and vertical circulation for peds and bikes to facilitate passage between the north side and south side of Central Expressway. And the fourth is designation of new areas for pickup and drop-off along Central Expressway and Moffett. Here is a close-up view of the undercrossings and the concourse. The concourse is the area between Central Expressway and the Caltrain tracks, and just south of that is the main stairway, is what we refer to as the main stairway. This slide here shows the existing condition on the north side of Central Expressway at Moffett Boulevard. This slide shows the proposed improvements on the north side of Central Expressway at Moffett Boulevard. On the west side of the Moffett Boulevard, at Central Expressway is what we refer to as the Moffett Plaza. The image on the left is an aerial view of the stairway and the ramp connecting to the undercrossing, and the image on the right shows a view of the tunnel from the stairway. On the east side of this intersection is what we refer to as the Adobe Plaza. The image on the right is an aerial view showing the stairway and elevator providing access to and from the undercrossing, and the image on the left shows a view of the undercrossing from the stairway. This slide shows the existing condition south side of Central Expressway, showing the Caltrain tracks. And this image shows the proposed improvements on the south side of Central. Here you can see the concourse area, ramps, and stairway to and from Castro Street to the undercrossing below Caltrain tracks. This image here shows the concourse area between Central and Caltrain. From here, you can see the access to the undercrossings. One leads to the Moffett Plaza, another one leads to the Adobe Plaza, and there is also a shorter undercrossing leading to Castro Street and Evelyn Avenue from the concourse area. And this slide here is a view of the undercrossings underneath the Caltrain tracks. From underneath the Caltrain tracks. With the recent City Council approval to permanently close the first 300 blocks of Castro Street to vehicle traffic, the project team is using this opportunity to realign Evelyn Avenue connection to provide a smoother transition where the two legs used to intersect with Castro Street, and provide sort of an S-curve to provide a safer crossing for bikes and pets. Along with the completion of the preliminary engineering and environmental clearance phase, the urban design guidelines was also developed for the project, and Jim Lightbody will speak more about this.
Yeah, thank you, Joy. I just for the committee's purpose, I managed the project through the planning and preliminary engineering phase before we turned it over to Caltrain for final design. So as part of that, we had a series of community meetings and other community outreach efforts in developing the project. And one thing that was clear from the beginning, there were concerns about underpasses and potential safety and comfort issues. And so in developing the plan, we made sure that we provided sufficient budget and concepts that would support an undercrossing that would be safe, secure, comfortable, and attractive, and become real community asset. As part of that, we developed a series of urban design guidelines, and this is a document that we can provide. It's on the city's website for the Transit Center. We can provide that to you. Has a lot of detail about some of the ideas for urban design, not just art, but for general urban design of the undercrossings to meet those objectives. So just wanted you to know there's a lot of history with the community and expectation that this is going to be a very attractive and comfortable and safe addition to the downtown environment. So
Thanks,
with that,
Jim.
I'll let Joy carry on.
I was wondering, is there an opportunity for art in the underground area?
Absolutely, that's what we're going to
Okay.
talk about.
Okay, great. Because I think there's a lot of room for that,
Yeah.
enhancing the. Yeah, okay, I'll let you continue. Thanks.
I'll continue. Thanks, Jim. As Jim mentioned, the urban design guidelines sets guidelines where art or architectural elements can be incorporated into the project. There are many opportunities for that in the project, and they can be included through surface treatments, lighting, landscaping, signage, and wayfinding, and also through use of fixtures and railings. One element of the project where urban design and or public art can be integrated to is the undercrossing. This slide here shows different examples of undercrossings in which art have been integrated in different ways. As you can see in the examples here, there's different tile treatments. They can be applied on walls, also on the flooring, and art can also be integrated or applied on the ceiling of the tunnel, as you can see in the bottom left image there. And also with the tunnels, we can incorporate lighting. That could be an architectural element or public art. When we get to that point, the project team came up with these underpass models initially. We are not tied down to these two, but I just wanted to show some examples of some unique shapes of the inside of the tunnel. We don't have to be stuck with the boring rectangular ones, and it's one opportunity where we can integrate public art. In addition to the undercrossings, another opportunity we will be looking into is incorporating public art in the concourse. This will help the project, or even for our community, to create a sense of place. The area between Central Expressway and Caltrain tracks is large. It creates many opportunities for us to apply different treatments or art. And that could be through use of surface treatments with different pavements for flooring, or different surface treatments for the walls of the structure, but also with landscaping, railings and light fixtures to create bright and inviting areas leading to the undercrossings. And then as the design continues to progress, the next step for the project team is to meet with the community in January to provide a project update, and also seek input on architectural elements that the community want to see included in the project. Staff will continue to coordinate with the project design team and finalize public art location recommendations, and return to the Visual Art Committee early next year to provide recommendations and initiate the call for artists. After receiving input from the VAC, the staff plans to go to council to provide update and forward a recommendation from the VAC. And in spring, staff will return to select an artist for the public art component of the project. And once we have a selected artist approved and on board, we can have the artist coordinate with the design team to make sure that what's needed to install the art gets incorporated into the design plans if needed. If it's a structural foundation or conduits for electrical work, and other things. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
If Joy, if I could just add one thing, I want to make sure it's clear to the committee that we're working hard, Joy and Robert and I and others at the city, to make sure that the base design of this project is a high quality urban design that meets a lot of the goals we have. So the art element is sort of on top of what we hope is a well-designed undercrossing and other rest of the project too.
Jim, do you have an architect a main architect that you're working with on the design, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there's an architect that works with HNTB. They're the design consultants under contract to Caltrain.
So they can give guidance also on what art would fit in with the design of the environment, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I would add that, sorry, go ahead, Jim.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that along with HNTB's in-house architect, Gail, has been brought on to their team.
Okay.
Well, hey, Robert. And thank you, Jim. I think it is really well designed. I'm impressed. Some cool looking images going on. I like all the bicycle incorporation and how wide and open a lot of those paths look. Even the underground ones look comfortable and roomy and spacious. So I think the public art can enhance the safety, the feeling of safety and comfort a lot. And one model I want to bring up from our past is at the community center, the architect there recommended having a lighted project at the end of a hallway because it looked kind of like a dark cave from the front. If you look at the building, it goes all the way back. There's a dark hallway. He said, put some light at the end. That was his recommendation. And we did. It worked really well. So I don't know if you know that piece. It's like a glass panel with a picture of a path leading out into some redwood forests, and it's really evenly backlit with natural looking LED lighting. It's kind of like mimics the natural wavelength of light. So it looks like you could just keep walking into the woods at the end of the hallway. That's the effect, and it's pretty great. So I think we have a good opportunity to incorporate light into whether it's a sculpture or a mural or some other art, whether it's just like a really well lit mural or there's light as part of the artwork itself that could help, I think, enhance the feeling of safety, especially at nighttime.
The light is very important. I mean, there was on your examples, there was one was especially well lit, one of the underpasses. So as somebody who walked through a lot of train underpasses and also had not so fun experiences in train underpasses, it is, a big issue, especially as a woman. And yeah, it could be a great opportunity to incorporate art into a well-lit or, underpass like that.
Is there any long-term planning to build up the area on the north side of that, over on Moffett Boulevard? Put in some housing, stuff like that. So all of this is intended for there to be a fair amount of people going through there, and so that would seem to be an ideal spot.
There already, of course, is the 100 Moffett development that was fairly recently built, which is a housing project. On the east side of Moffett, there's been longstanding interest from the city, as I understand it, to look at some development in that area, but nothing is presently happening there.
Well, given the trend, I'm sure, if not now, 10 years from now, there'll be plenty of people in there.
Yeah. I'm excited to see this on our schedule so soon because this whole transit center remodel has been, as long as I can remember, it's always been years and years in the future, and it's way down the line, and now it's actually happening. So I'm excited. Is there specific input you wanted from us today, or are you just kind of giving us a heads up, like this is the lay of the land, a little
Giving
primer?
you a heads up.
Okay.
The project hasn't gone to the VAC, so just kind of giving you a flavor of what's to come.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Are we at the stage where we need to start thinking about themes for maybe these underpasses, or what we would like to have as a discussion topic for us to get our minds wrapped around? So when you come next year in 2023, we're kind of poised.
We're happy to hear any input you have that we can share with our architect team.
I think this is time for a city-funded field trip for the VAC to London, maybe Paris, maybe
Yeah.
to look at art in subway stations.
or along in London, the South Bank area has great murals all along, and good to refresh one's memory when it's warmer in London, though. Please.
I'm in.
Awesome. Yeah. There's a lot of locations you can put art here. Like you could have something right by the light rail station just for those people, something by the train. So if someone rides one or the other, they can get their own dose of art. But I wanted to also bring up another idea to just put in your heads for the future. I was thinking first about light primarily for the underground, and now another thought came to me, which is plants, and like a living wall, something like that. And the reason I thought of that is not just because plants are nice and it would be cool to have them underground. It's also because of the smell that comes a lot of times with these underground crossings. I forget if it's Cal Ave or Palo Alto Station, but some of these underground crossings that just really strongly smell of urine. And if there's a way to mitigate that with our public art, that would be Nice.
Well, in Paris, there are some very nice examples of living walls done
Mhm.
along buildings.
Mhm.
Spectacular, where they transform a 4-story building with a living wall and plants along it. The infrastructure to water them is also built in, and it's actually
Yeah.
spectacular. So if one can have that as an idea, incorporate in it, it's transformational.
Yeah, and since it's underground, we could include, grow lights or the lights that
Yeah.
have the spectrum that the plants need to survive so that they don't get starved of their light. And that has the added benefit of making it an extremely well-lit place at night. Or,
And,
Yeah.
maybe a new profit source. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, actually,
Was it-
kind of adding to that, a nice public toilet would be good. Then, they don't have to
I really hope we have
use
that.
the walls of the,
Yeah,
tunnels.
that's probably out of our jurisdiction, but I don't know.
Well,
Are there
there's
any
An
plans?
great
artistic
designs.
public toilet.
There's great self-cleaning designs out there, they
Mhm.
even look good. So,
Yeah. Is there gonna be a bathroom? Staff.
There's been discussion about something at the transit center in the long-term phase, but not anything immediate in the current plans.
Okay, well, I guess that's part of our input too. More public bathrooms. I agree with you. Give them an alternative. That's not the wall underground.
right.
Yeah, looking forward to step 2. We have the public art location recommendations. So we're going to be coming back to you folks with specific locations. So keeping that in mind and thinking of that as a next step, as
Mhm.
well as the call for artists. So going back to Member Bryant's question about themes, that's really where the themes will tie in if we want to incorporate that into the call for artists.
Right, so we can think about that further down the line. Thank you so much.
Actually, your staff has a question for
Okay.
my colleagues. As there's another topic on the agenda later that the committee had asked me to look into. One of the issues has been this kind of bifurcation call for artists. So at what point does the committee provide a stipend to artists to do a sample of what it could look like? And so as a topic that's going to be on following this is historically for projects where the project is in excess of $60,000, the VAC in past projects, CIP projects, has actually provided a stipend to an artist to actually come up with some renderings to actually better understand what it could look like.
Yeah,
So
it's a
my
more
question,
detailed proposal, right?
so my maybe statement or question to my public work teammates is, you've outlined the timing for the VAC committee and certainly wanting not to be the thing that slows this project down, understanding maybe whether this project may trigger that. One of the things the committee is looking at is should there be some basis for decision when, there's a significant dollar amount. And so getting the art right and having it well thought out and actually having some small model of what it could look like. But that takes time. And so trying to really understand Robert, Jim, and Joy, the timing. And so I know you have it outlined here. I don't know if you have further guidance to the VAC specific to this project of like what that window is. So if they do a call for artists, typically you get responses, they narrow that down to like the top 4 and then really kind of flush it out for a good visual of what this could look like. So that there's a better sense of what the art piece is actually going to be in the locations you identified. Sorry, long-winded question, but would appreciate maybe your thoughts because they're going to get into this conversation in a future item.
So my initial thoughts is it would be a natural place for that to land as we hone down the list of artists to a group of something like 2 or 3. And then we could really invest in those models. So it makes a lot of sense for us to get that list down as small as possible. So in terms of steps that we're seeing in here, we can talk, Jim and Joy and I can talk about it, but it's probably going to be, between 2 and 4, you're going to be doing that whittling down process of evaluating artists. And so by the time we get to 4, we should have those models, ideally, if we're going to do them in hand. So policy K5 comes into play here. This project has a total budget of over $90 million. The city's contribution isn't quite that high, but we do have a substantial city contribution. So I believe the policy caps out the artists, the visual arts component at 400,000. So there will be some budget there for models, but I don't want to blow the budget on more models than are prudent. So that's really kind of the committee's call.
And just for edification, typically the models have been, or I should say stipends. They're stipends
Yes.
for artists. And
Thank
there's
you.
a memo in the packet if you wish to look at it real quickly. It's typically been about $2,000 to $5,000. So if
Okay.
it's 2 or 3 artists, a stipend of between $2,000 and $2,000 and $5,000
Okay.
to actually develop a model around it. So sorry to ask one more clarifying question once again, just making sure the committee is aware of triangulating these conversations is we say early 2003 and then spring in 2003. And for our public work teammates, reminding them the VAC does not have a meeting in January. So they're first back in February. So trying to understand first meeting in February, spring is what, February, March, April, May, so I want to make sure you guys are aware of that as well. And certainly at a staff level, we're in communication, but wanted to kind of daylight this for the committee. So everyone's aware of this, maybe quick sprint, if you will.
Yeah, and I can just add a little bit about the schedule. The final design is underway in the project. They're currently aiming for middle of the year to complete the 65% design. So as time goes by, some of the options may get precluded because of decisions made about how the structure is developed and so forth. We'd hope that there would be a remaining, substantial number of remaining opportunities that can be, worked out between 65 and 100% design. But there may be, depending on the nature of the proposal, it could restrict some things once they get beyond a certain stage of the design.
And
I
since
have a
all the
question.
staff is here, so
I
I could
have
ask
a
this.
question for John. For us
Oh, Joy.
to get models from the few selected artists, does that mean we would have to contract with each one for us to be able to pay them? And is the timeline for that contract similar to our typical standard contract?
No, these are generally excellent question.
I'm assuming that's the concern with the spring timing. Okay. And just clarification.
They're short form contracts, so they should be more straightforward, less cumbersome because of the dollar amount. But it is a contractual process. So it's a very good question, Joy. That's why I want to make sure that, kind of setting expectations with everyone about the timing and not having the tail wag the dog on a large public works project, but just understanding the timing and phasing. So given the significance of this, and I think as the VAC churns on some ideas and themes, that can be more crystallized as we move forward so that it's very clear what the ask would be in this kind of 2-phased RFP approach to say, we will look for some models, but we'll isolate down to 2 or 3, and then we'll provide small stipends to flush that out a little bit more with the idea that we would award at the subsequent kind of VAC meeting, something to that effect. So that's how we'd want to scope the call for artists going forward.
Could it be an idea to have one part of the area for public art to be like just vitrines or showcases that we could have, you know, changing exhibitions in? You know, people could, you know, be like large lit showcases that would also get light into the tunnels. I mean, I'm just throwing this out here, you know, as
like,
an
like you could
idea.
have I see what you like recessed, protected by a clear acrylic or something. You could have areas where you could hang 2D work in the tunnel, theoretically,
Right,
or a
exactly.
rotating sculpture garden or something
Right,
that, you know, has built-in lighting, but it's a space where you can
Or art,
substitute
you
in and
know,
out
and
different
then-
art. Yeah.
right. And then it's changing all the time. It's not like one mural or whatever, but it could be an opportunity for artists to, it could be the Mountain View Gallery, City of Mountain View Gallery, the tunnel from, you know, Castro Street to Moffett Boulevard. Just an
having
idea,
rotating
you
work.
know.
No, it's a great idea. I'm just, the concern for me is that we have like, this is a one-time budget expenditure that the city usually, that's how it usually works for the CIP project. We get the budget one time, we pick the art
Right,
one time, but I mean, since we're also concurrently working on the public art strategy, I don't know, maybe it might be possible to do something where it might be risky though, to say, we're gonna plan for this space that has rotating gallery space, but then what if that doesn't come through in the public art strategy later? Then we're,
well, you have to select
hanging.
artists also then to, you know, to show there,
yes,
so.
yeah, we would, but we would have to come up with, basically, we'd need more funding in the future on a regular basis to keep up that program.
Right,
Well, and I'd hate to miss an opportunity for some, you know, spectacular, whatever, murals, mosaics, you know, things like that. We get more opportunities for 2D art than we get
Yeah.
for the kind of stuff we can put in here.
Yeah. Well, we could
no,
do
no,
both.
this would be just a part of this, I'm just envisioning, you know, like, because there's a lot of tunnels there, a lot of different areas, so,
Yeah, it wouldn't have to be
you know.
exclusively rotating artwork,
right,
but
just throwing it out there.
The other
Put it
thing
on the
that you
agenda.
should be aware of is that most likely this is going to be the city's responsibility to maintain this undercrossing. You know, and we would expect to, and there may be some kind of cost sharing agreement with Caltrain, but for the most part, the city's going to have responsibility for all of the maintenance and keeping it clean and operating.
have we asked Caltrain to contribute a % for the public art? I know we can't
No.
require them, but
No.
are we, do you think we could request that?
Unlikely. At this
Unlikely
point.
to even do a request, okay.
Well, we'll certainly bring it up to
Yeah.
our
Okay.
department director,
Yeah.
but
I've spoken
cost
to,
sharing is high on our list of asks, and it
Got
has
it.
been for several years.
Okay, yeah, because I've just, in a previous discussion with someone at Valley Water, talking about public art, she mentioned that like, for that particular organization, not necessarily for Caltrain, but if we did have, say, a 1% requirement for a park in Mountain View, like McKelvey Park, then Valley Water came in, they provided a large part of the budget. We couldn't necessarily require they to contribute 1%, but we could ask. And she said, yeah, they would probably say yes, because for them, the budget isn't the concern. It's that they don't want to pick out the art. They don't want to administer it. They don't want to do the jurying process. But if it's just giving us money, that would be easy for them. So maybe it's the same for Caltrain. That would be great.
I have a question of comparison just for guidance. The last time we had a major building event was the rec center, the swimming pool. And when that came to us, that swimming pool area was well designed by the architect. And they had guidance for us of where art could go in that building. And so that gave us firm guidance of where to control what we selected and how we selected. Will we be in the similar situation in early 2023 when you come back to us, or is this great, or will we be in a more fluid environment at that time with more options presented?
So I would say the most important restriction for you folks is going to be where you can't place art. there's going to be an envelope around the rail operations where it's going to be inappropriate. So the slides that we saw today showed the tunnel areas. It also showed the concourse areas and a couple of plaza areas at ground level. So you're gonna, those are for you to contemplate whether you think it's more appropriate to have art pieces in the ground levels or any of those spaces below grade. So feel free to think openly about any of those spaces. We're early enough in the design. We're moving towards 65%. So we know the general geometry of what's going to be in place. So that's what you've seen in the slides. But within that geometry, as long as you're not putting something that's an obstruction, then you have a lot of latitude here.
Okay, great. Well, thank you.
As long as it's pressure washable.
Yeah.
Yes,
Ideally.
graffiti proof, well chosen material, so it's going to have some durability.
Yeah, I was going to ask earlier, but what Joy ended up asking, but almost the same question, very similar for John, just because we have all these other staff members here, which is if we, and it sounds like we are going to do the extra, maquette process or having an additional stipend to get more precise look at people's plans for the art, then what does that usually add to the timeline? I don't know if you were able to see that in your research. I'm guessing it's 1 or 2 extra VAC meetings, but I'm not sure.
It's really I'll just touch on it briefly, but it is a agendized item. But historically, the cost has been anywhere between $1,000 and $5,000, and it has added. It's basically added 2 months. So there's typically a skip in one VAC meeting with a VAC meeting to come back. So it's only really 2 meetings, but you're kind of skipping one. So you're adding basically 2 months to the process. So that is why I just wanted to understand and have Public Works teammates share kind of the timing, so that as we work back, if there's going to be this incremental step, doing a stipend to really get a true sense of what this piece could look like and modeled appropriately, that it's going to work from an engineering perspective, and that it makes visual sense. And for the space, we're kind of looking at almost like in theory, a 3-month process, right? So you have the call, you select down, you go off, negotiate, they get basically a month to work on it, and it comes back at the next you miss one VAC meeting and then you come back at the next. So you're kind of in like a 3-month piece there.
Yeah, just so everyone knows. But that process really does, I think, help us select, make the most informed decision on the best public art. I think it's worth it for the very expensive pieces.
So
any other comments?
Yeah.
I'm just
We do have
asking.
a committee member that does have their hand raised that would like to speak on this item. I'm going to unmute Bruce. You should be able to speak, Bruce.
Thanks, John. Really good stuff. I've been following this undercrossing project in a variety of ways over time. So great to see this update. I just wanted to mention a couple of things. I really like Cliff's idea about the living wall. That would be a great thing to do. And I believe that Green Spaces Mountain View would advocate for that. Not sure where best to do that, but I could talk with Robert and Jim offline perhaps about that, and Joy maybe. And that's what I'll plan on doing. And on the public facing restrooms, it's interesting that Jesse brought that up. I hadn't thought about it before. We're definitely advocating for those. We need a lot more of those around town and water fountains. But what I hadn't considered before is the artistic value of how you select those, and making sure that, for one thing, they're not really ugly. They need to be functional, but they can also be attractive and engaging. And I believe that San Francisco, even though they're spending bucket loads of money on those urinals up there, but they have gone through a process of making them attractive. And the new ones that they placed are really interesting looking, and they're set up to prevent graffiti by using sort of like a mottled surface on them. So they were able to abate graffiti, but they're also suitable for posting information, whether it's advertising or public notices and things like that. So it's one way to offset the cost is by using them for advertising. Not that we want big public restroom posters all over the place, but you know, it is one way to mitigate the costs. So I'm interested in that. And if your committee were to consider that, the artistic merits of those choices, I would absolutely want to advocate for that from a public perspective. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you, Bruce.
Good. There's nothing else. We can probably move on to the next item if no other comments for the public work teammates.
Okay, sounds good. Marcia, thank you very much for the presentation. I think we all enjoyed it, and we're looking forward to working with you more on that.
Yeah, that's
Thank you.
exciting. That's really
Yeah.
exciting.
It's very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, everybody. All right, so I guess our next agenda item is 7.2, guidance on public inquiries to VAC members. Staff will provide a brief verbal update on best practices associated with public inquiries related to Visual Arts Committee.
So this will be a very quick update, and this came about in November. Several committee members had been approached by some members of the public. So in talking with the clerk's office on what should happen going forward. So if you do receive inquiries from members of the public, you know, what's the city's position on this, or what does Mountain View do on this related to art? If you would be so kind as to forward that to me, I will do the initial interaction and then work with the clerk's office. If happy to engage the members of the VAC, but the direction was to actually forward those inquiries to staff, and we'll figure out kind of the best approach, whether it should be a staff response and or whether you can respond directly. So if you do get inquiries, and it will happen, people look to you as leaders in this community and certainly leaders in the world of art. And we certainly appreciate your service to this committee. But if you do get those types of inquiries, if you can just forward them to staff, and we'll work to address them. That may come back to you to address, and there may be no issue, but we would ask that you first come to staff. First, we'll work with the clerk's office in figuring out what the right solution to that question or inquiry is, and we'll go forward with it as a matter of practice. So it's a very brief update, but wanted to circle back as there had been some prior inquiries in November, and there was confusion on staff's part. And so this is a chance to provide that feedback to all of you should you receive those types of inquiries, wanting to know kind of the city's position or the role of the VAC. I'm happy to answer any questions associated with that.
Cool, thanks. It's very straightforward. So,
we still have a member of the public online if they have any questions on this particular item. Not seeing any hands raised on this item.
okay. All right, then we'll go to item 8. Oh, sorry, 7.3. Past thresholds related to RFP art evaluations requiring stipends. VAC to memorialize trigger for when RFP will be a two-phased approach to LS for artist stipend. Okay, so I guess John has something for us.
So within your packet, there is a very brief memo, one-page memo that does summarize when the VAC historically has considered doing a stipend approach. And I did go back through the various public art proposals that we had on file, and going back to basically 2009 and coming forward, and found that through that time, and this is when the K5 policy was a 1% fee on art. It is now a 2%, but a 1% fee on art. There were 3 projects that actually the VAC committees at those times decided to go through a stipend approach, which was they did a call for artists, given the size and magnitude and then dollar investment in the art. They did ask for a follow-up, and they provided a small stipend to artists to select artists to refine the art proposal to get a better sense of what it was going to be. And those 3 projects were the fire station number 5, the community center remodel, and the Rangstar Aquatic Center. So fire station number 5 in 2009, the percent for art project at that point in time was $67,000. It was a 1 location. And at the time, the committee approved a $500 stipend for the art that was ultimately deployed at that location. For the community center, a very significant project, very expensive remodel. The 1% art for that project was $140,000. So there were 4 locations identified for art. Excuse me. So for those 4 locations, the committee at the time did offer a $5,000 stipend. So the art ranges for the exterior, the pieces range from anywhere from $40,000 to $60,000, and for the interior, the value of the art was $75,000. So for the magnitude of art being offered or being looked at for that project, there was a $5,000 stipend offered to the small select artists in refining those art projects. And then finally, for the Rangsdorf Aquatic Center, the 1% art budget was $180,000. It looked at 3 locations, both internal and external, and the VAC at that time offered up a $1,000 stipend. I think when you kind of do the math on all of it, it seems as though when there is for a select art piece, a single art piece that's in excess of $60,000, the VAC has historically provided some type of stipend as low as $500, as high as $5,000. This memo was written really in response to the conversation and in dialogue at the November VAC meeting as a follow-up to help guide conversation. Tonight, the VAC could go a couple different ways, just have the conversation and not decide on an approach. The VAC could make a recommendation for projects of a certain dollar threshold per art piece where you'd like to see a more refined approach to the art piece, and you think in order to get that better refinement, a stipend should be offered, so a small contract to refine that art piece, you could take that action this evening on that. So it can be just discussion only, and if you're not coming to consensus, we can certainly bring it back in a more formal way. As discussed earlier this evening, as an item in the future to talk about was engaging with artists. So if you want to have that as a more holistic conversation at that time, can certainly take that recommendation and fold it back into that future item that was referenced earlier in the agenda. Staff is happy to take that direction from the committee as well. Or if you feel like you have enough information and you would like to come up with an approach, for the time being, this is what you feel like. If it doesn't trigger this, we're not going to entertain this path. But if a project does trigger this, we're going to go down this path. And when we issue a call for artists, we're going to know it's going to be a 2-phased kind of approach where we're going to do the call, narrow the pool, and then provide stipends for a more refined art piece. With that, happy to answer any questions committee members may have based upon the memo that was included in your packet.
I feel like I'm a little bit uneasy to decide this personally, kind of in a vacuum, because this to me is just one piece. Because as I mentioned earlier, I feel like we might have to have a closer look at the call for artists, like what we're going to ask the artist at the very first point of contact. Because one thought that I had is Fayette, because artists are the proposals are very diverse, and some artists you can automatically imagine what they're going to do for our project. Like the Fayette Park is a very good example with the metal and animal sculptures, right? It's less about what the artist is going to give us. It's more detail what he's actually going to do, but you automatically know what he's going to do for the park, more or less. Versus other artists that are, for example, painters, but they still put in a proposal for Fayette Park. We have no idea. They might have an amazing idea for the park, but from their portfolio, we would have no idea what they would be doing. So what we're getting in is very, very diverse. Artists in itself are almost already a proposal, right? Because they are so clear what they're doing. Like we would have no idea what they would be doing if we select that artist. And I feel like, so it highly depends. To me, it highly depends. Like the stipend depends on those factors as well, right? I would not have, even if the dollar amount would be higher, an artist like the Fayette Park artist, I would not need to give a stipend for a more clear proposal, right? For example, because I already get a pretty good idea. So I think, to me, it needs a more multi-step and more holistic approach to decide this. But I think it's a very good guideline. I definitely hope that at the end we get to a dollar amount, more or less, or a questionnaire like if this, then this, or something like that. But I think it's a good idea to look at dollar amounts. But at this point, I feel like we would I would feel more comfortable if we could have a bigger discussion about this.
Was that option C? I forget how many options there were, but that we would have a trigger at 60,000, whatever, where we would have that discussion, and we wouldn't be required to do really anything, but we'd say, okay, this is the opportunity for us to talk about it. Was that, did I get that right?
Yeah, so thank you. So once again, recognizing there's, you got that right, which is, one, trying to provide clarity to everyone, not only to the artist, to the VAC. So you could decide it by dollar threshold, and this was some of the background to tell you what's been done in the past. But recognizing maybe that's not, recognizing the desire for more information about things, this may not be the time to have this conversation. And so it could just be about thresholds, no thresholds, with no specific action. But based upon the feedback and reviewing the minutes and listening to the video again, there was this sense of like, when have we done the stipend? Like, what is that triggering factor? And it tends to be for that bigger piece that may not necessarily be so clear. As committee member Maher mentioned, it's like the range of things can be all over the place depending on the scope. But when it's just a $10,000 item, you're gonna be pretty narrow of what you're gonna get in that potential piece, or it may be scoped in a very narrow way. Where when you do a much broader call, the range of art pieces can be all over the place. I'm being a little long-winded in your answer, but that's what this was trying to solve. Committee Member Whitebread is addressing that, as that was a topic at the last meeting of like, at what point should we even be entertaining the stipend or not?
Yeah, I think 60,000 is a good number, and I don't know if you want to say it's required at that point, or that's just when we talk about it, and maybe we do it, maybe we don't. But and if we do pick a number, though, then I would want to have it inflation adjusted so that in 50 years' time we don't have a requirement that every single art project that comes before us has to have a stipend and an extra process. So.
Well, I certainly think we ought to retain the option to say, no, we don't need a stipend this time. But it's worked well for us in the past, and I imagine it'll be fairly obvious when it's going to work well for us in the future. If we're doing a subway tunnel under the train tracks, then I want to know what that thing's going to look
Yeah.
like.
Yeah,
So-
I would go with an idea that we are going to give a stipend in order to finalize the final design, because one, the budget's gone up. It's now not 1%, it's 2%. And we're gonna have major capital work coming on up. And also, I've seen that the quality of the resulting work has been improved by having artists have a stipend to do some work. So it almost, for me, it would be, let's have that as our default and then make decision not to do it rather than case by case, rather than making an exception that we'd give a stipend. Instead,
Yeah.
let's, as a default, we give a stipend unless we decide, no, we don't need it.
I'm more
And
comfortable with
work
that.
with them, then work with the artists
Yeah.
to really find, not be surprised. Like, I mean, again, I go back to Jesse and I were kind of surprised at the result from the Pyramid Park, and we don't want to be surprised. So it's that if the stipend helps us engage with the artists and refine and get the work and get feedback, then great, let's do it. But
Yeah.
recognizing that not all situations require a stipend, if we had the option to say, no, let's not do the stipend in this case.
Yeah,
But
it could
have
be
the
structured
model that-
like. Mhm.
But have the model that we default to a stipend unless we decide not to.
Yeah, it could be like if it's 60,000 or over, we should do a stipend unless a majority of the VAC votes otherwise, because in this particular case, it's clearly, you know, this artist always does the same type of artwork
Right,
or something,
right.
and we know what they're gonna do.
Yeah,
There could
yeah,
be a case like that.
yeah, like Regina mentioned, it's or Susie, it's off the shelf. They're already doing it, so we kind of
Yeah,
know.
yeah. Some
But-
artists do the same type of sculpture over and over and over again, and you have a
Right.
really good idea what they're gonna do. Some people do something completely different every time, or they're just entering a new medium for the first time for the submission, and then we really don't know.
But going back to what the consultant gave us feedback, 3 years ago, 3 lifetimes ago, where we're asking the artist to do work, we should, given how much money the artists usually make, we should help them recognize that they're doing work and pay them a little bit. As a model, anyway.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, you can't, nobody works for free,
Right, exactly, yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Cliff, that's a good idea to have it as a standard, and then we can always say, oh, it's clear what we're getting. We can waive the stipend.
And I think, I mean, I don't
And
know.
it should
how
be,
everyone else
and
feels.
it should be probably like like we pick like 3 artists as a possibility, and then they make their renderings and with the stipend, and then we can pick from that as
Mhm.
a second tier kind of thing, right?
Yeah, and I like the idea of having the stipend and the renderings before we make our final choice.
Right.
If we need one, we get 3 people to do a rendering, and then we use those to pick. But then that obviously benefits us later on too.
In regards to that, I was wondering, it would also level the playing field, like if we would, when we do a coffee submission, if we ask the artist maybe voluntarily, like give us an idea what they would do, not in the sense of a proposal or anything like that, but
Like the sketch. Most of them do that already. They have like a kind of rough
I
draft.
definitely wouldn't want them to work for free, but for their chances to be considered, if in the future we should consider telling them, well, give us an idea what you would be doing, like just in a sentence, like, because some artists, like the Fayette Park artists, it's easy to imagine, and some it's impossible to imagine. I don't know if we can incorporate that in some way to let them know in words, describe what you would be doing, and that might inform our decision who we want to invite. We would make a better decision if we knew roughly what they would be doing, what idea they have in their head. If they could just tell us that. And then from that, like Don said, maybe then we can actually select more artists than we're actually going to select and get and ask them to do a proposal. But from what we're getting as info right now, I think that's very hard to do. So
Yeah,
I
they
think
could
it's a
say
bigger
like,
question that we have to talk about, but yeah.
right. I mean, they could say, I want to do a mural, or I would like to do a fountain, or I would like to do a bench with XYZ, or a sculpture.
That's what I mean. Yeah, like
Right.
just give
yeah.
us a general idea. If you're a painter but you're applying for a park, would you paint a bench, or would you, or the pavement? Like what would you do?
Mhm.
Not in any way how it would look like, but more in the way of where, how, yeah. And
Well, and maybe it's an opportunity for newer people too. If we're booking, you know, $150,000 for a mosaic to cover an entire subway tunnel, you know, under the, not a subway tunnel, but, you know, a tunnel under the train tracks, we're not going to be we're going to be inclined to picking some real pros that have done this kind of thing before and are sending us pictures of their past work. But maybe there's some young artist that's an upcoming pro, and if we give them an opportunity to show us, you know, and they do a really good job. I mean, in some ways, having the stipend and the, you know, the extra requirements are a little Darwinian. It's like, oh, you didn't really put the time into this, so we're not going to expect you to do a good job on the finished product. But it can work the other way. And some new person can really knock it out of the park and show us that, even if they don't have as much history as some of the other people. So,
Like, how would
Is it?
everyone feel about saying we're gonna set like $60,000 threshold where we will kind of by default do a stipend unless the majority of us votes otherwise? Do that for now, and then all the other concerns Susie had and alterations or improvements to the selection process, we could address at a later date and try to make that
I
process
would
more
phrase
smooth.
it the way Dom did, that it's a trigger for us that we have to have a discussion about a stipend or not. I really like that approach a lot. That we pick a dollar amount like 60,000, and that will automatically trigger a discussion. Do we want that stipend or not? I think that's a good
No, that's a good
compromise and a good approach.
and if we're lucky, this will come up so often that the policy eventually develops itself, and we can say, okay, that's how we've done it these last 10 times, and we're going to lock that in. But yeah, let's leave it a little bit open.
Yeah, experience will tell us.
Do you think, does this make sense to you, John? Do you have any concerns, or if we go that direction?
Yeah, does that work, John?
I'm following you. I have other things rattling in my head about this. But it's not really for me to. I heard the comment about kind of making it a default, and then it's a blinker, right? It's a chance, make it the default, and you can always blink it off. I got that and understood that very clearly. I think there's some other questions not quite ready to ask the committee about, but I will draft this up for consideration.
I can think of some of those other questions too, but I think
because I think they're gonna.
I think you're breaking up, John.
One, I would say, if it's gonna be, sorry.
I think your connection's better now.
So if it's gonna be the default and the committee wants this as the default every time, this is gonna be a 3-month process just to select art.
Right.
Not every project's gonna align to a 3-month schedule. So I
Gotcha.
do think somewhere in here, and this is where I want to go back with the public works staff of like, when there's lead time, I think this works.
Yeah.
When there are projects that may not have as much lead time, building in a 3-month decision time and then execute an agreement, you're now at month 4 of just getting a contract done to actually do this with an artist. That may be problematic. So I do want to get some input from them before.
Okay.
But what I definitely hear the committee's feedback. I'm happy to work through it and work with the public works team on figuring out what the right approach is.
Yeah.
And I do want to go back to something committee member Mayor Hart mentioned, which I think is also extremely valuable. And I think those committee member Bryant also touched on this, and I have talked to public works about this, is especially if we know more about, say it's a park project, and we start to now get information about the scoping of the park and the community input from the members of the public on that park, that can go a long way in helping form and shape the approach to the art for that park. And that may also be part of that decision-making process of, we're going to have maybe a very clear idea of what the art may be. And so the call for artists may be very specific in the types of art, because the community has already signaled, this is what we'd like to see in this park. It's just a matter of placing it. Whereas things, maybe the community doesn't have big visions of what the art piece is. They know they want this playground equipment or this other thing here, but none of that community feedback really addressed art. That's where it's more to the VAC's discretion of kind of figuring out what is or should be the art. So I think that does play into the decision-making process, as already alluded to by the members of the committee. So let me go back to the public works folks and just try and understand from a timing frame. I think this will all kind of work out in the wash, but I am a little sensitive to adding more time to a process.
Yeah.
More time.
Yeah, it sounds like, so
Yeah.
we don't necessarily want to vote on this today. You can talk to Public Works, figure it out, and maybe there's something you could work out with them where there's like a fast track option or something.
Yep.
And I think we
Okay.
always want to give ourselves the option to say, okay, that's a bad idea this time. You know, this
Yeah.
won't work.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's true. Okay, sounds good. And whatever we come up with, that we should inflation adjust it according to the same rules and schedule that the K5 policy follows, so that they get bumped up at the same time.
Yep.
So this,
Understood.
okay, cool,
I appreciate the feedback.
awesome.
Um,
Okay.
We still have a member of the public on the line. Do you have any comments or would like to comment on this agenda item? Not seeing any hands raised.
Okay, then we'll go on to item 8, committee staff comments, questions, committee reports. No action will be taken on any questions raised by the committee at this time. Any questions, comments?
Your staff person has one comment. I want to
Okay.
thank the VAC committee this year. I've really enjoyed working with all of you through this process. I hope you have a lovely holiday with family and friends, or however you choose to spend it, and have a wonderful new year. But really, thank you for all the thoughtful feedback. Really enjoyed it this year and just really appreciate the time and passion you bring to this. So thank you so much for making it a good year, and look forward to seeing all of you in February of 2023. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jan.
Back at you,
Yeah.
John. Thanks.
Thank you,
Exactly.
likewise. Yeah.
Have a good holiday. Oh yeah, background. Okay,
What
that's
they
why
said, yeah.
That's why I be muted the whole time.
The kids agree.
I agree. No, thank you for all your good work, John.
Yes,
yeah.
thank you so much, John. Awesome work and great to work with all of you guys.
Yeah,
Yes, you too. All right, thanks, everybody.
happy holidays.
Good to see you.
Yeah, happy holidays.
Bye.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Happy holidays. All right, good night, everybody.
Bye.